Gatorade is the #1 proven electrolyte blend designed to hydrate better than water. So you can lose more sweat and raise your game. Gatorade, is it in you?
This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about.
Alrighty, y'all. It is executive producer Haley Sperling here in for Bianca Martin, and I am here with one of Madison's newest bookstore owners / operators, Augie McGinty-Wake. Augie, welcome to CityCast Madison.
Thank you, Haley. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation and excited to have it with you. For folks who don't know, Haley and I went to college together, so this is a fun reconnection as well.
Yeah, cat's out of the bag. We're friends. Shocking. Madison is a small town. But, Augie, you have been making some waves in local media because you did something kind of wild. Back in November 2024, longtime State Street used bookstore Paul's Bookstore announced that it would be closing its doors. And you jumped on this as an opportunity to buy up a couple thousand pieces of their inventory and start your own collection. So what inspired you to do that?
That's a great question. And you are far from the first person to acknowledge it was a little insane, perhaps. But when Paul's announced they were closing, I, like many others, I think, in the Madison community who are part of the UW community, alumni, felt really sad. It was devastating to lose that bookstore. We all know it was more than just a bookstore. It really was a piece of our community and our history in Madison, and it is truly irreplaceable. But I also have had a dream that I have flirted with at various degrees over years of getting into bookselling. And one of the biggest hurdles for me in that dream was getting enough of an inventory to kickstart bookselling in a serious way. I would go to estate sales, I would go to garage sales, pick up books here and there, and kind of try and fits and starts at different points to get into this bookselling business. But when it kind of clicked for me that Paul's closing could possibly be an opportunity for me to finally make that jump, I called them out of the blue and I said, I don't know anything about buying books at the scale or selling them, but I love your store and I'm here in Madison and I've always wanted to do this. And I might be interested in buying a bulk number of your books. And I was negotiating with Martha Askins, who's longtime owner Carol's daughter. And we negotiated for a couple of months about what kinds of sections I wanted and what the price point was. And I'm so happy with the deal we ended up with, which was about 2,000 books. And it was their full literary criticism section and their full hardcover fiction section.
That's awesome. And so for folks who might not know, Paul's Bookstore is and now was really an icon on State Street, founded back in 1954 by Paul Askins. It stood the test of time, selling its unique and frankly kind of obscure books for decades. And so I'm curious, Augie, what is your connection to Paul's?
Again, I share this with a lot of people who lived in Madison, who went to UW. Paul's to me was a place I discovered in earnest as a freshman, and I would go there in between classes, and it really felt like you're stepping outside the world when you went into that bookstore, and you would be all of a sudden among all of these old, dusty books, volumes that there's probably only one or two of them in the world. They're really niche types of knowledge and information. They all ended up at Paul's, and going there, to me, what I've been saying to people, it felt like it expanded what reality could be to me, because all of a sudden there's just all of this knowledge in front of you that you're like, I don't know what this is about. I don't think almost anybody knows what this is about. It's just so weird and so interesting. And you could really lose yourself in there. I know I did many, many times. The best used bookstores they're more than just a bookstore. And Paul's encapsulated this better than really any other bookstore I've been to. They show you what reality can be, and they kind of open up a whole new world to you when you walk in there. And it's a community space for people who are seeking knowledge, and knowledge that is not the type of knowledge you can get when you walk into a Barnes and Noble. It's underneath something. You have to dig around, and that's a certain type of person. And that when you get those type of people together, that creates a certain type of community. And Paul's did that for, like you said, so long, stood the test of time from the 50s to the 2020s. It's just incredible. And some of those books I think were in there for decades and decades. I know when I bought the books, there were some I recognized from at least when I was an undergrad, like 10 years ago. I'd be like, I remember this one. So, that was going on too. But yeah, Paul's, again, irreplaceable, one of a kind. I'm proud to be a little part of keeping it alive because the story for Paul should not end here.
Yeah, just like a book, there's always another chapter, right?
Always another chapter.
Is this a sequel? I mean, I do remember too, like going to Paul's as an undergrad at UW and searching for like this one very obscure like journalism political book that I needed for this like higher level class. And of course, no one else had it, but Paul's did. And so it really was that place for the weird and the obscure. And it's just so nice that you have those great memories and that you can keep them carrying on, in this tradition like that. You mentioned it. You and I, Augie, we are not strangers. We went to UW-Madison at the same time and ran in similar circles. You were big in college Dems and I was working at the Badger Herald. And, I always knew you as the big politics guy, but have you always been into literature?
I have always been into literature. My dad is a writer and small press publisher out of Cambridge, Wisconsin, just outside of Madison, Bob Wake. So I grew up around books, grew up around a love of books. And I certainly got really swept up in political work in college and for a period of my life. But through that, I was still taking some literature classes at UW. It remained a big interest for me. And I certainly was going to Paul's through and through. So yeah, I love books. I love the object of the book, like as much, if not more than reading, if I'm being really honest and candid with myself.
I think a lot of people feel that way, to be honest,
Yeah, it's such a beautiful object. I love just like spending time with these objects that contain so much. They contain more than just like the words on the pages. There's so much history within, especially used books. And as I was going through Paul's books, and I've also done some other acquisitions since the big Paul's one, you'll see people leaving notes and old bookmarks and all sorts of interesting ephemera. And with the Paul stuff in particular, a lot of that is Madison related ephemera. And the stamps inside the books are from people in the area. A lot of them are professors. So then, it's fun to do a little bit of research. You'll Google that professor. You'll kind of see what they were teaching. And then you'll see like, wow, this was in their collection. And I love making all those connections, especially when there's a Madison tie. I think that's just so satisfying for me.
That's so awesome. I mean, that is the epitome of like small town Madison, right? Not only you and I knowing each other and like having this full circle moment on this podcast, but then you finding all these notes and whatnot. And that's so just such like a unique thing that you can really only get in books, right? And I know I called this out earlier, but you had this feature in Isthmus, shout out to more independent journalism. But there was a photo caption where you said, sometimes I just like to go out here and look at the books. Which I thought was very nice.
I mean, they did capture me there. I can't pretend like that's not true. And I do just like to sit there and look at the books. It's what I love more than anything else. I spent a few months when I got these books from Paul's. They finally came into my house around beginning of February, and it took me about 3 months, I would say, to get them all cataloged. I'm putting them into a spreadsheet. I'm putting them up on bookshelves, organizing them. And I would explain this to people, and some people are like, did you just like get so bored? Was this overwhelming? Like, was this just sounds like such an undertaking. I was like, I don't know how to explain this to you, but I truly I've never had more fun in my life. I was just, every time I opened up a box of books was like a treasure trove. And I didn't know everything I bought really very intimately, So I'm just opening up these boxes of books that are mine, that are in my house. It's a miracle to me. And I get to see what they are and look at them and put them in my spreadsheet and look at the copyright page and figure out the edition. It's so much fun. I'm having so much fun.
That's so, so awesome. And I mean, I just have to imagine, it's like Christmas or Hanukkah every day, right? You get to open a new box and see all these awesome books and, be part of this pillar of the community that was part of the Madison community for so long. And, I'm curious about, your take on Paul's and why you think it was able to stand that test of time so well and why it was just such an iconic piece of the Madison, business community on State Street specifically too.
Yeah. I'm so glad you bring up like the State Street piece of it, because I know when I was going through this process with the Paul's folks, and I was chatting with them through it. They would reminisce about a time not that long ago where there was a bookstore on every block of State Street. And I even remember in the last, 10, 15 years, when I got to UW, it was like, okay, there's Paul's. Right next door to Paul's was Browsers. There's Rainbow Co-op selling books. Room of One's Own was still on State Street. All of that has even been hollowed out just in the last 10, 15 years. And they talk about the decades before that, there were even more bookstores on State Street. So the story of bookstores in general in Madison over the last, decades, I think, has been a story of loss. There's no way around that. There are a lot of exciting things happening now that I do want to talk about, but that is something worth acknowledging and being sad about, I think. But I think Paul's was able to stand through the longest. They're the last ones to go from State Street. And I do think they curated something so special in that store. And it was not because they were selling more books than anyone else necessarily. It's because the type of space it was and how I really felt like I could go in there and stumble onto something new that would change my reading trajectory for my life. That's such a beautiful thing. There's multiple authors that I would go into Paul's. I didn't know who they were when I walked into Paul's. I walked out with one of their books, and I still love those authors to this day. People like Chester Himes is one that comes to mind. John Kennedy Toole, so Confederacy of Dunces for Toole, and If He Hollers, Let Him Go for Himes. These were novels I didn't really know when I walked in the store. I don't know what possessed me to buy them, but I did, and I walked out with them, and those are still some of my favorite authors to this day. So those types of things happen in a store like Paul's that has inventory that is unique and interesting, and you're not going to find anywhere else. And it's just such a special thing. I'm just so grateful that I got to experience it, and that's why I'm so motivated about what I'm doing now. It's never going to replace Paul's, and I don't want to ever try and stack myself up against Paul's, but I do feel like I am trying, and I feel a sort of a sense of responsibility to just keep the story of Paul's alive, to keep the ethos of Paul's alive, and just doing stuff like this. I love talking about Paul's, and I want to keep doing that for as long as people will let me.
I love that. Yeah, keeping the memory alive, keeping that spirit going. And I mean, how does it feel to you to carry on that legacy and knowing that it did have such an impactful presence in the Madison community for so long, and on people like yourself too?
Sometimes you can get yourself thinking, well, it was just a bookstore. What can this really be? But it does feel like big to me. It feels sort of heady and weighty because it is the store that I know meant so much to me. And I know I've been hearing from people, since I've been launching this, and especially since I've gotten a little bit of press around it, people reaching out to me saying, thank you for doing this. I love Paul's, sharing their stories. I lived in Madison in the 60s and the 70s. I went to Paul's for this reason or that reason. And getting those messages I get them Instagram DMs. People have commented on articles, on Facebook posts and stuff. It warms my heart. It makes me really feel validated in what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, this is exactly what I want. I want people to feel like there's a space to share that type of information, those types of stories, and bond with them as kindred spirits in that way for me and that person. And I mean, it feeds my soul for sure. Just so grateful to that store and grateful to the Askins family. I want to acknowledge that too, because Paul, we know, opened in the 50s, passed away in the 70s. Carol had never done much with the store. She had never really been a bookseller, and she kept that store going from the 70s to the 20s and picked it up as she went, and just like a legend. She decided to hang it up at 94. I mean, amazing.
Truly
amazing. And when I was going through this process, I was working mostly with her kids, who are now themselves in their 60s and 70s. And I know that was more than just closing down the business for them. It was, I think, a really emotional experience to close down this store that for them, that was their whole lives, the whole of their existence. Their parents have owned and operated this bookstore. And there were not just kids of Paul and Carol, but grandkids and great grandkids who were in that store helping close it down. I remember I went in one day and there was a young girl, maybe 5 to 7, pulling all of the tacks off of the sides of the bookshelves where they had pinned. If you go in there, they'd pin all sorts of, little ephemera they would find in the books. It would be postcards and bookmarks. And she was just in there just pulling one tack off at a time. That kind of stuff was going on for months in that store. And I know it was just such an emotional undertaking. And also it's a lot to close down business outside of that. So they were having to process all that at once. And I can't quite even imagine what that was like for them. But I know I feel very grateful that they felt comfortable bringing me into that process in some small way and selling me the number of books they did. So I just feel so much gratitude.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
I was deep in it, gaming on Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7. Unfolding the screen made it twice as big and so immersive, I kinda lost myself. Might have trolled a little too close to the sun. Someone in the chat told me to touch grass, so I took my Z Fold 7 outside and kept playing. Still won, got a tan, and a nice little reset. Powerful processor, realistic graphics, you stay locked in, streak stays alive. Can your phone do that?
The new Galaxy Z Fold 7. Get yours at Samsung.com.
You have been selling your books online via Instagram. Like, walk us through what that business is like for you. Like, how can people buy books? Are you doing anything in person? Do you have regular hours? I mean, I know you're literally operating this out of your house in Madison. So, like, what's that like? How's that working?
I will say off the top, if you want to buy books from me, you can find me at Augie's Books on Instagram and eBay. But in terms of the operation, yeah, I do not have regular hours. I don't think I can legally have regular hours since I am in my house.
Just a guy selling books.
Just a guy selling books. But I do have all the books up on shelves, and I'm very happy to open up for folks if they reach out to me. Happy to have people over, look at the collection. If you keep an eye on my Instagram, I'm interested in having open houses somewhat regularly for folks to come and browse and shop. Most of my business so far has been a combination of eBay and Instagram, and then friends and family acquaintances coming through the shop and buying books. I will say also, I think the Paul's collection, Paul's had no online presence, which is part of the charm too. That was really cool. You couldn't go online and buy the books from Paul's. You had to go to the store. But the other thing that did is some of these books, there are very few of them in the world, very few copies floating around. And that's at this point with book selling, which has been changed so much by the internet. That's a whole another can of worms. But the main thing that has really done is obliterated value once a certain number of books are on the market. And just all the books that were sitting in little tiny bookstores, in people's houses, a lot of these have been pulled into the light, pulled onto the internet, pulled into the market when they weren't in the market in the same way before the internet. So as soon as there are even 10 or 15 copies of a book floating around online, the value just plummets, obliterates the value. But with the Paul's books, some of them, there are not that many. There are maybe, you can count on one hand how many are floating around online. So these are really precious books, and some of them are very valuable, and the market has not seen them before, or not seen them in decades, seen them before the internet. So I have had some good luck selling these books one by one online, I think for that reason, because some of them have been sitting in Paul's, and the kind of obsessive collectors who are interested in this sort of stuff, these obscure volumes put out by university presses about some other obscure novelist from, the 20th century or something. Those are the type of people who are trawling the internet constantly for new copies. And I've been able to bring some of those out, I think.
That's awesome. Yeah, you really have this treasure trove of literally precious gems that now people, outside of the Madison community can have access to. So that's pretty cool to be able to sort of like open that scope there too. Here on CityCast Madison, we are listener supported. The neighbors in our membership program literally make our show possible. So shout out to them. And we know how important and make or break community support can be. So I'm curious to know, what has the community response been like for you so far?
It's been overwhelmingly positive, and I am overwhelmed by the response. It's better than I could have ever imagined. There was a very reasonable possibility. I was going to buy all these books, and they were just going to sit in my basement, unsold, and I was going to be like, what did I do? Why did I buy all these books?
Oh, no.
But that didn't happen, and I could not be more grateful to the community and all my friends and family, and just everyone for being so supportive of me as I endeavor on this very strange and kind of insane journey. So I will say I've gotten a lot of messages, like I said, from folks who are like, I love Paul's. That store meant so much to me. who want to come look at my books and browse and sort of recreate the Paul's experience. The other thing Paul's did is they threw in some of their bookshelves, which I also am so grateful for. So it does feel a little bit like Paul's in my basement. I have about 10 of their old bookshelves that all of these books are on. So it does feel like a facsimile of being at the store. Yeah. And so people have been super supportive. The community has been super supportive. People have been reaching out, and especially since there's the Isthmus piece, there's the Channel 3000 piece, there's this piece. People have been, coming out of the woodwork and sharing their stories about Paul's and wanting to come shop, and that's just a win for me.
I love that. And I love that you can literally sort of recreate that Paul's experience by having not only their books, but the bookshelves. I mean, that's just so cool, right?
I had to shave them down a bit because my basement ceiling is so low, but they are there.
That's so awesome. I mean, so you've touched on this a little bit. Independent bookstores have obviously faced plenty of hurdles in today's digital and instant shopping age. So how do you view the role of bookstores in shaping communities, and particularly in Madison, which is a city really full of intellectual and, literary folks?
Yes, Madison on paper is the type of city that should just be absolutely able to withstand any attacks on brick and mortar bookstores. It's absolutely the type of community that should be able to do that. And there is a lot going on now that I think is really exciting. And I do think bookstores are so important for community. I think, like I was saying, they bring together a certain type of people, especially used bookstores. And I do think that's a meaningful distinction. Used bookstores bring people out who are looking for something weird and different, and they're digging for something that can't be bought on a regular shelf. A lot of the books in new bookstores, which no hate on them, I read new books too, but a lot of those you can buy at like a Walmart, or a Target. Sure. They have book sections like that. That's something different than digging through dusty old books that came from some grandparent's basement and end up at this used bookstore. So I think those type of people are very meaningful, and finding a community and a space for those type of people is very meaningful. And I do think it is very sad what's happened in Madison on State Street specifically, this hollowing out of bookstores, and especially in the way it kind of interacts with the university. I mean, Paul's did this, I think, more than any other bookstore did in downtown Madison, of taking in a lot of books from professors, kind of like having this exchange of information with the university. And I know I felt like when I was going through the books that I bought, but also when I was there as a student, I would run into my professors there in person. I would also run into their books on the shelves. I've noted like Bill Cronin, who I think a lot of UW students remember, environmental studies professor, who I think he would often give his books to Paul's. I ended up with a number of his books from the library of Bill Cronin stamped on there. So Paul's did that better than anybody. But to get back to your question, I think that community space for people to come look at used books is so important. And there have been new bookstores popping up. You have Madison Paperbacks on Atwood now with Todd's a great guy doing that right across from Room of One's Own. And I know Room of One's Own has very graciously accepted him, across the street as a neighbor. And I know the guy who sells used books at Room of One's Own, Russell, was actually very helpful to me when I was kind of thinking through the negotiation with Paul's. And the community of people who sell books in Madison is very tight-knit and very friendly. And there is new energy, I think, with, Madison Paperbacks is new. The Book Deal is relatively new.
Yeah, that's a classic. People love that one over on Mineral Point Road.
Great spot. For whatever reason, I mean, this might be a different conversation, but there seems to be something on the east side, like I'm over there on the east side, Madison Paperbacks over there, Room is over there. So some of this energy that used to maybe be more around State Street and downtown has moved a little bit into the neighborhoods of the east side, I think, as downtown has become more dominated by, restaurants and bars and like vintage shops and stuff that people are more into now.
Wow. Well, we could have so many chapters and so many different, so many different editions of this conversations, but, we got to wrap up at some time. But before we let you go, Augie, I know you've been growing your collection, hitting up those estate sales and whatnot. So I really got to know, like, what to you, and it doesn't have to be, to the greater good, but what to you is the coolest book that you have in your collection, be it from Paul's or another spot?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And I have been hitting up the estate sales, and something else really cool that's been happening is people reaching out and saying, my parents were professors at UW, or I've been a professor. I'm downsizing. I'm selling my parents' house. They have all these books. Are you interested in this? And that is just, my heart bursts. It makes me so happy to be able to receive that type of collection over and over and over again, because that's what Paul's was. It was the downstream effect from professors and just bibliophiles. And so that's been so cool. And I've had that happen a few times. And just a few weeks ago, I was at an estate sale, and I bought, in bulk, a few hundred books from a woman who was selling her parents' house. Her parents had been literature professors, English professors at UW, and they were in assisted living now. And I was very grateful to her for thinking of me and reaching out to me and letting me come look through the books in that way. And I couldn't believe my eyes when I found in there a first edition of A Good Man is Hard to Find, a Flannery O'Connor collection. It's a first edition, somewhere between the second and fourth printing, and they're running about 1,000 to 1,500 copies for each of these runs. And this was in the mid-50s, so it's one of like the first 3,000 copies of this book that were ever to exist, and that's really cool. And it's also pretty valuable, and I just couldn't believe that was in my hands. It was shocking to me. I did a lot of research because I was like, can this really be what this is? Is this possible?
It's huge. Your treasure trove has been opened, expanded, and it's so cool that it just gets to keep growing all the time. Augie, thank you for walking us through your story, and I'm so excited for you in this next chapter of adventure, and I will stop making book puns now, but this has been so fun.
No, thank you so much. The puns write themselves, and I hope we have many chapters to come together. And thank you for doing this. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it, and this was such a fun conversation. I really, really enjoyed it.
That's Augie McGinnity Wake, owner of Augie's Books. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm executive producer Haley Sperling. Don't forget, you can support this show and get some sweet perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. And if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this episode with a bookworm, someone who loves to get deep into some vintage pages. And don't forget, CityCast is hiring for a brand new show coming to my hometown, the Twin Cities. There are a number of open positions that include host, creative producer, and senior account executive. So if you or someone you know might be interested in any of those roles, head to citycast.fm to learn more. All right, y'all, we will be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until next time, take good care. We love books.